Hi, everyone. So today we're going to talk about modulation. This is a concept that is in absolutely no way foreign to you if you've played or studied music at all, basically. Um, but it probably is something that you have not thought about theoretically, like how to properly identify it, to objectify it, how to certainly in a notation system, either in pop music or classical music or whatever, um, objectify it in a way that you can, put through symbols you can show to someone, right? And that's really what we're going to talk about today. But I preface it like that because I think it's important to understand that orally you are going to hear these things. Like you're going to know, oh, that was a modulation that changed keys. So make sure that you're relying on that part of your understanding, right? It's a long way of saying when you're looking at your homework and you're working through the examples, make sure you listen because your listening will really, really help at this point. And it's going to help you understand not only like the actual modulation that we're analyzing, but also how the chromaticism and accidentals and all that kind of stuff is working. So yeah, modulation. Up to this point in Music 101, 102, we've been talking about this sort of paradigm between diatonic music versus chromatic music. So there's this music that's been in a key, right? Diatonic, you're in C, you're in E flat, right? There are three flats, that's it, right? You're in C minor, there's a B natural sometimes, occasionally an A natural, but that's it, right? And then we've started now dipping our toes into the water of this other thing, this chromaticism. But to this point, all we've done is look at chromaticism as this sort of objectification, right? You're just looking at a moment. We're looking at a 5 of 5, a 7 of 6, whatever, right? We haven't yet actually applied them. Like, what are they doing? How do we use these chords? Well, it turns out they're doing something often, and that idea is tonicization. That they're tonicizing something, that they're temporarily placing an emphasis into a new key. They're making something temporarily sound like it could be tonic. And you'd have things like this, and you've done a number of these on your homework, part writing them, analyzing them. 5, 7 of 5, we're in the key of C. This looks like a D7, and it moves to G. But immediately, there's an F natural, which means the sense of G major is totally destroyed because this F sharp is what's making it sound like G. That's the leading tone. That's what's pushing us up to G. As soon as that disappears, what we've had is a tonicization. We've had this idea that we're emphasizing G, but really we're not moving to G. G's not actually tonic, right? It just sounds more important. And that always we are still in the key of C and we're moving back to 1. Well, modulation is a product of tonicization. Tonicization, in fact, leads to modulation. And this is the idea where we're going to have to think about this loop, right? Because it's easy to say that to you as like, well, tonicization, right? It's going to lead to modulation. And it does. And you can look at this sort of visually, right? And think, how do I know if it changed keys? How do I know if it's a tonicization, right? Well, visually, you're going to start to see a lot of accidentals, and you're going to visually see cadences in the new key, right? And a cadence, we've been looking at phrases recently, right? That's a pause that has some sort of moment of repose, probably a pause, a breath, something like that. Specifically, whenever you've had those cadences in your phrase analyses, what you're getting is predominant, dominant, tonic in a key. You're getting some sort of like 2-6-5-1 or 6-2-6-5 at like a half cadence or something like that. You're getting some sort of like that, a pattern like that as part of the basic phrase model. That, right, visually is something you can identify. However, this portion of it, the listening portion, is going to be incredibly useful for you. Not only in kind of making sense of what you're seeing visually, but just like literally hearing that it did modulate and then singing, using your aural skills, your sort of solfege skills and all that kind of stuff to figure out, okay, what key was I in? Now this other thing sounds like do. What note am I singing when I sing do now? You run to a piano, grab your instrument, check that. That's what key you modulated to. And then you do this loop, right? So say it just looks way too crazy and you can't figure it out, right? Listen and sing. And often the listening and singing will tell you the answer. It's like, oh, right, that thing right there is do. And then you go to this and you think, okay, cool. How did that happen? Right? And that's the process, right? You go through and then you look for your cadences, look for where did these, sort of accidentals start popping up? Where did we start moving to a new key? So how do we show what we're hearing with modulations? Okay, so here are the steps. First, number one, always listen, okay? I know I'm harping on it a lot, but I know that it's really easy to treat your music theory homework often as like a puzzle or something. I was guilty of it as well as an undergraduate, for sure. You sort of almost make it like a Sudoku puzzle or a crossword puzzle, right? And you just solve it and turn it back in. And you can do reasonably well at doing that, I think, and get good grades or whatever. But it's not the point of the assignment. The point of the assignment is to build the loop between thinking about something, looking at it, listening to it, and then thinking about what the listening is telling you about what you're thinking about, right? So make sure you listen, not only to continue to do that loop, but also I think it's just going to help a tremendous amount. Then you ask yourself, hey, did this piece modulate? Or if there's a moment where you think it's modulating, where you're seeing lots of accidentals, right? You start seeing all these accidentals. You're seeing all these like fives of X, right? They're starting to pop up in the music, just like you've seen them in your homework, but now they're real, right? They're in a piece of music. The question then you want to ask is, did it modulate? And then there's a little sub 2A here that is, it might not. And that's okay. So I'm going to give you homework that I'll say, does this piece modulate? And there's going to be more than one right answer. And that's okay. I think there are many pieces where you could say it does not or it does. It's very cool. And it's one of the you're sort of starting to peek behind the curtain of how we use theory to talk about something that isn't so objective. It's not just like, yes, that's a 5 of 5. Yes, that's a 5 of 6. No, it's what do you hear, right? And why? And why is that significant? And how are you going to do something different than other people with that knowledge? What are you going to do? How is that going to improve your performance, your students' performance, your composition, etc.? Right? So that's cool. That's very fun. It's like it's why and how we use theory. So say it does modulate, you move to step 3 and you say, cool, let's find a cadence. And that cadence is, where's the first cadence, the first pause in the new key? So where did we pause for the first time in a new key? And then you want to back up. And we're going to do something called pivoting. And we're going to create a pivot modulation. This is the process I want you to go through. And we're going to look at other modulations here, but I want you to go through this process merely because hierarchically, this is the most likely way you're going to want to indicate your modulation. It doesn't necessarily have to work like this, and you'll see in a minute that it objectively does not. But in classical music, for sure, this is very common, this process, where we're going to think through all this stuff algorithmically, find the cadence in the new key, back up from it, and then pivot and try to see how we can shift keys. And I'm going to show you that here in a second. But I just wanted to preview that because in a minute, I'm going to talk to you about phrase modulations that will not do this. It's just a different way of thinking. They're just less common. Okay, so easier to show than tell, right? So let's just listen. This is a piece by Bach, a little chorale. I'm going to kind of alt-tab out of here, and we're going to play this. I'm going to play a recording of it. And what I want you to do is listen. The first time you approach these things, just listen to it. Indicate some pauses, which in your sort of vernacular, that's saying where the phrase is, right? And then also visually, look and see, where do you start seeing accidentals? And accidentals indicate some sort of tonal instability. Like it could be modulating, it could not be modulating, it could be changing keys, maybe it's not changing keys, right? But they're important to note. And you can do this even maybe before you listen. I don't want you to do an analysis, but to go through and mark these sorts of things is probably fine. Just be like, cool, we have some accidentals, they're happening. Great. And then you listen, just to make it clear, so you can see it as you're going through things left to right. So they don't surprise you or something like that. So, okay, let's listen. I'm going to pull this up, and then I will hop back in. Break. Okay, sing do. you're singing that, hopefully, or that sounds like do. And then I want you, I know this is tricky, make sure you check your pitch, right? And make sure that what you're singing is a B flat. It should be a B flat because that's just me checking to see, did we modulate at that point? Is that a modulation? No, we started in the key of B flat, and you guys are probably singing a B flat, which means B flat is do, which means we haven't changed keys, which should make sense, right? There have not been any accidentals, right? There's no instability at this point. Hopefully that's like almost rhetorical, right? To go and do that's, well, of course, we're still in the same key, but you want to get in the habit of that, to pause and sing, check your pitch. Okay, cool. And this is why we work on it in 108 and 107, right? Okay, so we're going to go back. It's going to repeat, and then it's going to keep moving. Keep going in accidentals. Sing do. Is that a B flat? No, it's not a B flat. Do. What note is that? We keep doing this. I didn't load my piano, so it's got to load, but it is kind of a really out of tune C because I'm not a very good singer and it's a little flat, but that's okay. Yeah, it's a C. Okay, so we've modulated. Okay, how do we know we modulated? Because you heard it. If you were singing do there, if you're going do, that means you modulated. Now, it's possible, I guess, to analyze these things without that if you don't think you heard it modulate. Does that make sense? If you sang and you weren't singing a C there, you could try to analyze it without a modulation. What you're going to get is some pretty weird chromaticism, some fives of X and X and X, like all that stuff. But let's just assume that at some point we've established that this is now do, which means we need to figure out how, with our Roman numerals, we can square calling that 1, but having the key signature of 2 flats. And that's where this pivot business comes in. So if you back up and you look at this again, these steps, it says, listen, did the piece modulate? Yes, cool. Find the cadence. Cadence. That's where we paused. It's the first cadence in the new key. It's the first cadence, the pause where you can hear it in a new key. Back up and pivot. So what does that mean? It means that you want to back up to as close to where the modulation happens, the cadence, as possible, but also have the analysis make sense. And this is easier to show than it is to kind of abstractly explain like that. But you'll see that there's a way that you can do this. So we say this, that's 1. We sang do, right? Let's back up. Okay, here's the accidentals. This, now we know if this is going to C, that was probably the leading tone in C minor. And that's a C minor chord. This A flat, well, that A flat, does that make sense with C minor? Yeah, it does, right? A flat's in the key of C minor. So that means we're in C minor here, or the music is pushing us towards it. So let's keep backing up. Why don't we try to say, up to this point, it's probably fairly unstable and we're not sure what's happening. And again, you can listen to this and listen and think like, see if you don't know what's happening here, but at some point you know that it did in fact change keys. But let's say, can we try to do what I'm saying here, this pivot here? This is as close to the modulation as possible, right? And then show how we're sort of transitioning, spinning into a new key. So the way that we do that is we create this thing called a bracket or a pivot bracket, or I'll call them brackets. And you show that by doing this. And what this is, and be very careful about how you draw these. Sometimes I see students do like some very odd kind of things like this sometimes, but the reason it's drawn like this is so that you can show this analysis here. We're going to write in the Roman numerals here in the key of B flat, and then we're going to change to the key of C minor here, and there's going to be a moment, a chord here that exists in both keys, where it pivots, it shifts into the new key. Okay, so let's see if that works. We're in the key of B flat here, which you are, right? And that F, A, F, C, This is a 5. This is probably a passing tone. A reminder again, if you want to just analyze this, just stop the recording and just look at this and give it a shot. I'm going to go quickly just because of the sake of saving time. It's a 5. This is a chord with an accidental in it. Skip it. It's some sort of secondary dominant, probably, unless I'm lying to you. But skip it. What is this? C and E flat. That's probably a 2. You back up and you think, does B natural, D and F make sense in the key of the 2, which is C minor? Yes. That is a 7 fully diminished 6 of 2, right? To 2, passing tone, 2, 6. And here's where we're going to pivot. What you want to show now is 2, 6 is 2, 6. That's C minor chord is 2, 6 in the key of B flat. Can we call that something in the key of C minor? Well, that would be 1, 6. Or you could even call it 1 if you want to count the low C there. And we could call this 2 if you want. It's 2 and it's 1 in the new key. And then, and this is why the bracket looks like this, then everything else we analyze in the key of C minor. And it's going to help a lot because this chord right here is D, F, A flat, C. D, F, A flat, C. What is that in the key of C minor? That's your 2 half diminished 6, 5. And just think for a second, if you didn't pivot, say we didn't do this, how do you deal with this chord in the key of B flat major? Right? You guys would be staring at that and thinking, is that a 5 of 5? Right? You'd be looking at it and thinking it's a 7 half diminished of something, and it's not. It's not anything. What it is, it's the 2 half diminished 6, 5 in C. That's the only way you can wrap your brain around it. And that's why we have to pivot. And that's sort of the idea of like when I was saying, okay, let's find the cadence, let's back up, and let's find a spot that's as close to the modulation, the sort of cadence as possible, and spin into it. And you happen to find this moment, right after the pivot where you absolutely have to have been in the key of C minor, otherwise this chord's not going to make sense. And then the cool thing is about modulations, they're actually going to make your life easier because now we're just in C minor. So now this chord that would have been a 5 of something is just G, B, G, D, F. It's 5, 7. It's not a 5 of anything. It's just 5, 7 because now we're in the key of C minor. Okay? This is the fundamental process. The things to be aware of, right? It's an aural experience for sure. And it requires you to listen. You have to listen. And you're going to do your analyses. I promise you, this is going to happen. You're going to do analysis where you're going through and your Roman numerals are going to make absolutely no sense. You're going to be going along and you're going to be getting things like 3 diminished, 7, 4, half diminished, 6, 5, or some, I don't know, whatever. These sorts of things are insane because they're not actually answers, right? These are not the Roman numerals we use, at least at this point. But what they should do is set off alarms thinking, hey, maybe those chords are something else in another key. Did we change keys? This sort of stuff I see all the time from students who I know didn't listen. And then if you listen, you're going to hear this right away, that those can't possibly be right. Let's listen to one more, okay? And I'll stop the video and we'll do another one talking about phrase modulations. This is some Chopin. Really beautiful, short little piece. Let's take a look at it. We're in the key of A minor. Sort of scan through really fast and think, okay, do I see any accidentals? We're in A minor. You see some over here. And hopefully these here jump out as probably lower neighbor passing tone. They're pretty fast, 8th note sort of things. This one is a G sharp. That's the leading tone, right? We're in the key of A minor. This D natural is a courtesy accidental because there was a D sharp there. So this is not actually chromatic. And you keep going. We're like, ooh, wait, hold on. G sharp. That's the leading tone. We're still in A minor. And then, uh-oh, what happened here? Well, there's a G natural, right? So there is no G natural, right, in the key of A minor. There is in like A natural minor, but not in like A harmonic minor. And then there are a ton of accidentals here. And we've definitely moved to another key. Let's listen. Does it modulate? Oops, back it up. Did that change keys? Let's listen one more time. This absolutely sounds like Do to me. Like really powerfully sounds like Do. So how could we make that make sense? Well, if E is Do, what key did we modulate to? And they're right. This doesn't use the sharp here. This thing is correct. It goes to E, not sharp, not E major, but E minor. So we modulate to E minor. And that's like modulating to what? The 5, right? In the key of A, since E is 5. And that squares with kind of like backing up, right? The D sharps, that's the leading tone, right? In E minor, the F sharp, right? If you think about the key signature of E minor, that would be 1 sharp, which is the F sharp, right? So this is all pushing us towards it. And then that makes sense all of a sudden, right? The natural makes sense that this is in fact not like necessarily a weird chord in A minor. This is a 1 chord, right? It looks like tonic. So how do we deal with this? How could we possibly pivot to this key here? When you think bum bum ba dum bum 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 ba da da dee da dee yum ba da dee dum bum bum ya da dee da bum bum, right? So we definitely are in the key of E minor here. Where can we pivot? Right? We can't pivot here because these are things that are like already in the cadence. You could try pivoting here. And let's try that. Let's see what that looks like. If we're in the key of A minor here, right? And we're jamming along in A, this chord right here, what is that in the key of A minor? That would be minor 5. And what is that in the key of E minor? That would be 1, right? This is a little tricky, right? Because I don't think when you hear this, you hear that as a 5 chord, as a dominant chord. My guess is the place we would want to pivot is that already at this point, you're hearing this as stable, as like tonic-y, like strangely tonic-y, that we can try and pivot back here. What if we put a pivot right here and we thought, this is E minor. What would this be? A and A? That would be 1, right? Because we're in the key of A minor here. And then we're pivoting here. And this becomes what? What is A in the key of E minor now? That becomes 4. And now this chord is just 1. And here, right, zooming in, this is everyone's favorite chord. Say that facetiously. This looks like a 1-6-4. But really what this is 5-6-4, 5-3-1. That's your strong cadence. Very, very strong cadence in the key of E minor to tonic. We'll listen to it one more time. See if you hear this. I'm curious. This is like a vague one. It's a little inspecific. But that's what also makes it kind of cool. Yeah, this sounds like 1 to me. It sounds like tonic, which means we need to be changing keys here in order to call this what we need to call it, which is 1. And again, that's the whole point of Roman numerals, right? Is you're calling it exactly what you hear, which in this case is tonic. Okay, that's the concept of modulation and how we use pivoting to do that. Okay, I'm going to make another video. We'll talk about phrase modulations in that one. Phrase modulations are less common and much easier. The majority of what you're going to be looking at is stuff like this, okay? And like listening and trying to find a moment where you can, in fact, spin into a new key. All right, so let me know if you have questions. Again, these are the perfect sort of things to go over and listen to one-on-one. We can do that distantly really easily. Just let me know. I'm happy to do that, okay? Yeah, just let me know if you have questions, and I'll talk to you guys later.